Welcome to the Exam Study Expert Podcast, helping you ace your exams at school and university through the psychology of high performance and the science of studying smarter, not harder. It's my pleasure to introduce your host, the Cambridge-trained memory psychologist and exam success coach, William Wadsworth.
Hello and welcome to the Exam Study Experts podcast. The weeks running up to an exam often feel like quite a distinct phase of your learning compared to everything else. It's quite an important phase, and it's not really one we've talked about much on the podcast before. But it's often something that Alex and I often work on when we're spending time with our coaching clients. And there's quite a few useful things that come up in conversations at this point about what to focus your prep on in those final few weeks, and also how to handle the exam day itself so that you can maximize your score. Today, we're giving you a ringside seat on one of those conversations with a coaching client of mine called Sibo. This recording was made just a few weeks before she was due to take a major set of exams as a specialist in psychiatry. To bring you up to speed on where we had got to, we'd already done some work in previous coaching sessions on her learning strategy, finding a good system for her to learn fast and remember more, especially as her exams required her to know a really quite vast body of knowledge, as well as working on things like setting up a consistent routine that worked in the context of her pretty full life, helping her overcome procrastination and stick to her goals through a combination of systems that suited her and a little gentle accountability. In the conversation you're about to hear, we are going to cover what she's going to focus on in her preparations in the final few weeks she's got left before she takes the exam, as well as test day strategies to help her find those all-important extra marks. And we'll even touch on some useful mindset points as well, the sorts of things that can crop up, particularly in the final few weeks. I think there are a lot of really helpful general lessons here that could apply to your circumstances too, particularly in those final few weeks leading up to a big exam. And I think that by hearing them in the context of a real person actually going through this for herself, that should hopefully really bring the lessons to life for you and help them, feel more real and learn how they might work out in practice. So I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation today. I think you'll get a lot out of it, particularly if you've got exams coming up. But we're going to open by asking Sibo to just give us a little background on the sort of exams she's taking.
So I'm working on my psychiatry board exam. So I'm a doctor's practicing psychiatry. Then I'm doing postgrad in psychiatry so that I can be a psychiatrist. So it's like my board exam. Yeah. And it's been tough. I've done this exam before and it didn't go well. It went south. I was very shocked. But reflecting on, just going through the journey again and soliciting the help of an exam coach. So that's how I met you, William, because after I received my results, I was just so shocked. It was the first time I had an academic failure. But also, I think what really stunned me was that I didn't see it coming. Then I was just like, then I really need help. Because clearly, this is not something I can do on my own. Clearly, I was blindsided or something has to change. I need to change my technique. And honestly, I think trying to get an exam coach, I wasn't sure what I was really looking for, but I just wanted to consult and to just go through the technique I had used and see if, there were any changes I could make. Yeah. So, and I think that very first meeting it set the bar for me because it made me realize that, my problem was that I was familiar with my work, but I really could not retrieve it. I couldn't recall it. So I think just after the first meeting, it was just me working on my retrieval practice. And it was I had to do a whole haul on how I studied, taking notes with intention, active studying, asking questions when I'm taking notes, instead of just putting things down, and also like making time for retrieval. Because as I was like doing the work again, I'm like, oh, I did this, but I don't even remember studying it.
Yeah.
I don't remember writing it down because I wasn't going over to retrieve the work, but also to revise the work. So it was just like, oh, I've done that, I'm done with it, it's in the past.
Yeah.
And exactly that, it's in the past, you never remember it, never comes back to the present if you don't revise it. So yeah, I don't know if I'm going on too much, but yeah, that was just it. And I think right now, 3 weeks before my exam, I feel like I'm a totally different person. Like the way I study, even my attitude, I feel like I have the facts and I can recall the facts. And I understand that going into the exam, I must be able to know the facts. But previously, I was just like all over the place. And yeah, so looking at my study technique definitely changed the game for me. And I think it made me also feel more confident in how I approach my studies, because I knew like I had a technique and it was working. I added flashcards also, just to improve my retrieval. And I do, I'm doing the online ones. I do them myself, but it's on my phone, which is nice. So wherever I am, like if I'm in between patients, I can just go on my Anki and look at these things that I studied. So going over the material over and over again. And then I think another thing that I've been telling everyone is I have it written here on my study room. Try to remember it's okay. You are training. Don't be afraid to remember, to do the practice, because I think I would become anxious thinking, oh, I'm not going to remember.
Yeah.
But understanding that it's not about remembering or not, it's about the process. Yeah. It's about training your mind to remember. And that is part of the learning, like you gather information, you assimilate it, it's in your brain, but then you have to train yourself to be able to remember it. And I was scared of taking in questions I don't know, because it's like, oh, it's going to show that I don't remember this. Yeah. And so what? It's you're not on exam day yet. Yeah. So you need to know that, okay, you need to work on this. So that really helped me. And I've been telling my friends also, like when we do questions and people will be like so despondent because they don't remember. I'm like, no, but that's the whole point. Yeah. And that's the whole point of the exercise, to see where your deficits are, because sometimes you think that you know it, but you really don't.
Yeah, so it's okay to make mistakes in the training. It's okay to make mistakes while you're doing your retrieval practice. It's practice. You're not supposed to get every single answer right. And we learn almost just as much, possibly even more, from what we get wrong or what we don't remember, provided we see what the right answer should have been. Helps it to stick for next time. That's all part of the training. It's all part of the practice.
Yeah. Also, so that, and also getting a study group really helped me, I think, for just the accountability aspect. And sometimes when you just feel like, don't wanna, why must I? And then you have an appointment, you must meet people and you must show up. So that has really helped me.
Yeah.
I think initially, and even with our last appointment, we talked about like, what must I do? Like, must I take anything chemicals to enhance my memory, right, yeah. So that I can remember? And I know I was like going back and forth with this until I just realized, it's not necessary. And look, just making sure you get your exercise on and drinking your water. Like I use nuts, I drink nuts, I eat nuts, don't drink them. But this so good, and I always feel so energized after taking them. And then I realized, oh, actually I don't need chemicals to do this, Yeah. And if I just make sure that I plan my time and get enough sleep, then I'm going to be able to show up and be productive by taking breaks in between. So I'm really grateful. And you know what? So I was talking to my friend. So we have, like group of doctors. I think there's 5 of us who are writing now. So there's like a group. And then I was telling my friend this, that, I was quoting, what you were telling me. I'm like, guys, this is what my exam coach said. And I'm telling them it's William Wordsworth. And she's like, I actually know him.
No way.
Yeah, that might sound crazy. She actually had a session with you, I think.
So I'm just interrupting briefly. I found out at this point in the conversation, totally unbeknownst to me up until this moment live in the chat we were having, that 2 separate psychiatrists in the same office, the same exact office, had both independently found their way to me and hired me as their exam coach, which was just such a crazy coincidence. I've redacted a tiny bit of the main conversation with Sibo at this point, because as we were discovering this, we both used the full name of the colleague of Sibo's that was my other coaching client, and I don't normally use clients' full names here on the show, at least not without their permission. So I've just snipped a little bit of the conversation out. But Sibo and her colleague may live in the other hemisphere of the planet to me, but the world felt very small in this particular moment in this conversation. Let's pick up the action and we'll get right back into it.
What are the odds? Because like William Wordsworth, I know him. He, I was like, he was my coach, and I listened to his podcast, and then we started like just going over, talking about you and how awesome you are. So what are the odds?
That's crazy.
Like what?
That's absolutely crazy.
It is.
Well, do say hi. I hope everything's going well for her too.
They are in the same boat.
Yeah.
And because it was interesting, like the way she was talking, and also just observing her in the study methods and things she was doing, like, she's very interesting. So I always liked her for that. So when we started talking, we realized, we actually had seen the same exam coach. Yeah. So that was cool.
Amazing. So that's great. That's amazing. So you've changed all these things. You've improved all these things about your study technique. You've got your retrieval practice working well. You've got your study groups to help with the accountability. It sounds like it's been going really well, and it sounds like the results you've been getting, you've been really happy with and improving the confidence. Now here we are, 3 weeks out before the exam. How are you feeling at the moment?
What must I do? Like, of course, like I still have concepts that I want to revise, because most of the work like I've done, so I'm like just going over it again, but using practice questions to sort of like go over it. I've really also tried to work on my approach to the exam, because there's single best answer, so you have 4 options which are all right, but you need to get the most correct answer. So you need to be very your concentration and attention needs to be good. You need to be able to take each and everything they say as something that could contribute, could help you, come up with an answer. And so what I found, sometimes I just like maybe braze through answers, like the questions just, quickly read. I'm like, okay, I know what you want. But like I've had to practice to read line by line and not be in a rush, because everything in there is a clue. And like you said, like, speak to your friends that feel like they're intimidating you. So I've done that also, just like put myself in a space where I don't feel comfortable. But it's interesting to see that you don't do as well in a place where you're feeling like anxious, and then try to calm yourself so that you can come up with better answers.
It does get better with practice. If it feels awkward and uncomfortable at first, practicing in front of friends or whatever, then that's almost a sign that this is good practice to be doing.
It is.
Working through it helps you prepare for... You'll still be nervous, but you'll be that much more prepared for dealing with the nerves and still being able to think clearly. By doing those kinds of practices. There's a couple of things I wanted to suggest. Is this a digital exam, so you take it on a computer? Yeah. Do you get note paper or a whiteboard or anything?
You have a paper. They give you you make notes.
You got paper to make notes. Okay. So a couple of thoughts. First, when you're reading a question, my go-to advice, if the exam is on paper, is to be really quite aggressive and proactive about underlining and putting a big box around various bits of the question to kind of pull it apart and pick it apart and make sure you pay attention to all the key little bits of information in the question. You can't really do that so well on a screen.
They have a highlighter.
At the very least, you can highlight, yes? I mean, so, you can use the cursor and, so that's helpful. I would also say when it comes to the answer options, a really good tip generally for multiple choice, and I think it's even more important for exams like yours, kind of advanced multiple choice, if you like, where you've got the sort of single best answer and you might have multiple answers that are actually correct, but you're looking for the kind of most correct. I really like to have some sort of system to score the answers as you're reading through them. So what I would do, in your case, you've got the question on the screen and the answer options on the screen, and then you've got some paper to make notes on. So in my notes, I'd write down the question number and then just A, B, C, D on 4 lines to represent the 4 answers. I won't copy out the answer, obviously. That wastes too much time. But then as I'm looking through each answer option on the screen, I reach a judgment about it and how correct it is, which I then record on my paper in my notes. So let's say I look at option A and I think, that's definitely correct. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great answer. I might give it a score of a double tick in my little system. So double tick meaning very, very confident this is very accurate, very right, very correct. Let's say I look at option B and I'm not really sure. Maybe I'd score that with a question mark. I look at option C and maybe I think it might be right, but I'm not like 100%. Maybe I'd give that a tick question mark as a score to indicate I think it's right. And then maybe option D, I look at that, and maybe option D as well. I say, I'm definitely sure that's right. And so I give that a double tick as well. So what that would mean is then I've got option A and option D, which I've both scored with a double tick. I've said both of these answers, like I'm very sure those are right. So then I just need to decide, well, okay, which one of these is the best pick of the 2? So there's 2 I've scored the same. I need to now pick out, okay, which one of these am I going to go for? It does a couple of things for you. One, it makes sure that you are being very systematic in evaluating each option as it comes. 2, if you don't do this, you kind of have to remember your judgments in your head. And that's just an extra strain on kind of working memory, like your kind of processing power. Like if you have to, by the time you look at option number 4, you've kind of got to remember your judgments about option A, B, and C. And you've got to remember all the way back to option A that you thought that was a good one as well. You've got to kind of hold that idea in your head while you're thinking about the others. So it just kind of clogs up your thinking power a little bit. Whereas if you write it down, you can let go of those judgments as you make them. It frees up as much of your processing power to evaluate each option.
So it's like you start afresh with a new option without being clouded by option. Because often as you go through option C, you are still thinking about option A and it clouds the judgment of option A just as an option in its, because you constantly comparing, then you don't maybe explore all that option C will come with, because you also having this bias, but you sure it could just be A,
Absolutely. And it's also helpful if you need to come back to answers later. So is there some sort of system in your exam where you can like flag questions and come back to them later if you're not so sure? So this scoring, you can look back through your notes and go back to, if you're coming back to question 7, say, you can look back at question 7 and you'll have written down A, B, C, D next to the question number 7 in your notes. And you'll see your judgments that you had originally. And that might help you shortcut your way to checking your thoughts on question 7. And you'll see, oh, okay, yes, I remember now. I was checking between these 2. I was checking between A and C, or A and D. Let me just double check. B, no, I'm happy that's excluded. C, no, I'm happy to exclude that. Okay, let me just think about A and D again. And it saves you time sort of picking up your train of thought where you left off if you are going to come back to questions later, which is quite helpful.
And making that decision between A and B, like if A has 2 ticks and D has 2 ticks, that I find that very hard. Like now what I've been doing is just like try and see which one is more risky kind of thing. Like go back to the STEM and look, yeah, what are your thoughts around that? I like the system. I'm actually going to use it now as I practice.
Yeah, it's a nice one. And you can come up with your own little code. I mean, mine one runs from double tick to single tick to tick question mark, and then question mark in the middle for really not sure either way, then cross question mark for slightly think it's wrong, single cross for I think this is wrong, then double cross for this is absolutely definitely wrong. I've got no particular advice for choosing between two answers you think are equally good, other than, and this is quite hard to talk to without a specific example, but sometimes you get questions where there are sort of multiple components to the question. So there are multiple issues in play. So let me try and make up an example, and you might not have any questions that are like this, but maybe the principle would apply to questions you do actually have. So let me try and give the example. Let's say you have a question that comes up, and it's basically asking what would be an appropriate treatment for this set of symptoms, and it gives you like 5 symptoms. What you could do is kind of make a little table of the 5 symptoms, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then evaluate, okay, option A, option D, these are the two I'm deciding between. How do they score on each of these 5 criteria? And you might get option A is pretty good on 4 out of the 5, and option D is good on 5 out of the 5. So if there's opportunity to kind of break it apart a little bit more, that's usually a good approach to take.
Cool, that's nice. I think I've used that strategy. So we studied the DSM-5.
Yeah.
A criteria-based, system.
If you're not familiar with psychology, DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, if I recall correctly, and that is basically the manual that contains all the different sort of mental health disorders that you might diagnose someone with, and the criteria that you need to meet, or the symptoms that you might look for to get a certain diagnosis.
Definitely. So it's like if you're thinking of this is like depression, major depressive episode, you need 5 symptoms. Right. So if you put between A and B, then you're like, oh, but they have 4, then you like, oh, okay, so clearly that excludes option A if it was a diagnosis of MDD. So I've tried. I've played around with that in my practice, and I've discovered that sometimes I just, sometimes you want it to be the answer that you want it to be. So, and you're like, but that's not, like, stick to facts. So I've also learned about, okay, in exams, it's not about thinking out of the box when it comes to the question. The question is the question. The facts are the facts. They are there. And use the facts that you have been given. Don't add your other facts or think, because what I would do is but what if this and this and this happens? But no, they're not asking about your what if scenarios. They are asking about what is in there, and the examiner had an intention for bringing those particular things. And my job is to actually get to what he was trying to ask when they put those certain key pointers in the question.
I think that's a really important point. My old chemistry teacher back at school had a really nice phrase that I think sums this up. That's stuck with me ever since, which is stick with what you know. Like, the exam isn't out to trip you up. Even a really hard exam, like a really advanced exam like yours, they're not out to trip you up. It might be complex, but you don't have to make stuff up to answer the questions. You don't have to be creative to answer the questions. Stick with what you know, stick with what the question tells you, stick with what's there in black and white. I think that's a really important point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was struggling with that. So it's like one of the things I've noted, oh, okay, so I need to, when I'm practicing, be very intentional about sticking to what has been asked. go back line by line. I'm not a very pedantic person. But with the exams, you have to be, like, you absolutely need to be, because everything that was said there was said with a purpose, and that could be a clue to getting the answer right. But I really wanted to ask you, just like 3 weeks before exam, 1 week before exam, 2 days before exam, whilst you are doing the exams, like, what do you do? 3 weeks before, to 1 week before, and like that day when I go right and then I come back, what would be your advice? Because I know last time I went back and I was like, oh my gosh, I got that wrong. I got that answer wrong. Panicking.
Yeah, don't look up what the answers should have been. That doesn't help anybody. That the exam you've just taken goes from in the moment the examiner says pens down or keyboards down, I suppose, if it's a digital exam on a computer. That exam,
mouse down.
Yeah, that exam goes from being the most important thing in your life to the least important thing in your life. And your job now is to refocus on what's next and the next exam. Okay, in terms of what to do in the final sprint, what are your ideas? What could you do?
To me right now, I feel like it's practice.
Yeah.
And looking at my, because practice will reveal areas of weakness. And then you go and reinforce there. Because sometimes if you don't practice, you won't know where if you have a weakness. And also you go through your blueprint. So I've been going through my blueprint and just checking that I've covered the things that are in my blueprint, and if maybe there's something I've left behind, and sort of like go through that also. And I think that's another thing I was thinking, some people say, no, you can never learn anything new in the 3 weeks before exam, in the day before exam, or you can't learn anything new. I was like, I don't know. I know last time, the 2 weeks before the exam, I couldn't anymore. I was not in the space to do anything, even practice.
Yeah.
I
mean, I would generally say with the final 3 weeks, you get more benefit from focusing on consolidating things you've seen before rather than trying to look at brand new things for the first time. Because typically it would take a couple of repetitions at least before you get to the point where you know new stuff, whereas you've already got a head start with things you've seen before, and it might just be one final repetition in the final few weeks can help you get it to a point where you could answer the questions on it in the exam. Making peace with the fact that you'll never know every single detail that there is to know, particularly for an exam like yours, I think is quite an important thing. No one has ever finished learning for an exam like this. It's impossible. You can only do your best in the time you've got available. There'll be some details you don't know, and that's okay, because you don't need 100% to pass the exam.
I was like 2 points behind the borderline candidate like last time.
So close.
And it's so close, but yet so far.
You'll be okay. You'll be okay. You'll be okay. You were so close last time. Think of all the good things you've been doing since then and how much more confident you're feeling, even compared to, August, September when we first spoke.
Mm-hmm.
And you were already so close last time. So just think how good this time's going to be for you. You made flashcards or Q&A notes? A bit of both, was it?
A bit of both.
Yeah.
So I started with Q&A notes.
Yeah.
And those are so good, especially when you're like going over the topic again and revising. Yeah. They're really good, and they make your notes too. Like you don't have these elaborated notes that don't make sense, but you know exactly what you need to know in the topic. So I use those, and then flashcards as I was moving along those notes, because then my notes, like there's a lot of notes. I can't have them with me wherever I go. And I'm like, if I have to go and get my license, I'm missing time. But I could have, my phone with me and just be going through some concepts that I've already studied whilst I'm waiting the line. So that has been the advantage of using Anki.
How long would it take you to go back through and test yourself on all your flashcards or all your Q&A notes?
I don't know. Because I was thinking about them like there's so much.
Like if you had 2 days or 3 days solid, would you get through it all?
Probably. Just working through them.
Yeah.
Working through.
If you have time for that, that is quite a good exercise to do in the last 3 weeks before an exam. So if you've made something like flashcards or Q&A notes, when you're in the final few weeks, like short-term memory is starting to kick in as an effect. So it's easier to remember something you heard in the last few weeks than it was if you only looked at it last in, September. So it's kind of a nice opportunity just to look back through everything, do a sort of final round of retrieval practice on like everything or as much as possible. And again, don't worry if you make some mistakes at this stage. Because we're so close to the exam, it's even more likely that some of those mistakes you might remember the right answer when you look at it. If you have time, you could even do like a second round of that. So let's say it takes you 3 days to go through everything, and then maybe there's 20% of the questions that you feel are particularly challenging and are also important points, particularly important points to know. So you identify, maybe like 10, 20% of the questions. So that might then only take you 3 or 4 hours to go through. So you might do kind of 2 rounds like that. So you get a second round of practice on those questions you got wrong that are particularly important. Do you feel you've got would you have time over the next 3 weeks to do something like that, as well as doing a few practice questions?
I think so, because I'm thinking the exam is on a Thursday and a Friday.
Yeah.
So if I can start like that a week before, it's actually know that, that is something that, because you feel like, okay, you have a plan, that is what you're going to be doing now.
And hey, if you don't get through everything, if you don't get through every topic, no worries. You just do as much as you got time for.
Yeah. Because with practice also, you like, I don't remember this well. Then you are going back. You try to remember, okay, it's not coming, then you just go back. So there's opportunities for reviewing your work with, using different modalities. Yeah. Maybe you will get to it, but the Anki cards is just, it gives you that confidence that you've gone through everything again. Yeah.
You were asking about what to do on the day you've written the exam, I think, as well. Tell me your timetable for those 2 days. So what time roughly are the papers?
It's 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
1 5.
1 to 5 both days. 5 o'clock on day one, I would do nothing. I take it easy. I go back to wherever I'm sleeping that night and I just have something nice to eat, chill out. Have a bath, try and get an early night. And if you may or may not sleep well. Not everybody sleeps super well at exam time, but don't worry about it. You still try and give yourself an early night. And I'll tell you what, you're much less likely to sleep well if you're staying up all night trying to cram your flashcards. I guess the morning of both papers. So you've got your paper at 1 o'clock on the first day, your paper at 1 o'clock on the second day. I might just take an hour, maybe 45 minutes, an hour, something. Just have a final look through a few particularly important little corners. Maybe that kind of 10% of the material I'd identified that's both hard and high yield, so important, likely to come up. Once I've done that second round, if there's anything that I'm really still struggling with at that point, maybe I just give myself a couple of sheets of A4 paper worth of space to just scribble down, okay, these are the things that I'm still really struggling with and that haven't stuck yet. And those couple of sheets are what I look through the morning of both exams. And potentially if something has come up in exam 1 and then on day 2, I just cross it out from my cheat sheet almost. And then I look through what's remaining. If I can do a bit of retrieval practice on it, if I can write out a few of those, I might be key tables, key formulas, key sets of symptoms or diagnostic criteria or whatever it is. If I can sort of write out a few of those from memory just to practice it. But yeah, like those days, basically, I'm just taking it easy. I'm not doing too much outside the exam because the exams are going to take a lot out of you. It'll take a lot of focus, a lot of concentration. You want to preserve your energy for that. How are you feeling about it?
There are days I feel like I got this. I see myself doing this. And I'm just like, oh. But I'm a totally different person than the person I was 3 weeks before my exam last time.
Yeah. If you're ever having a wobble, that sounds like the perfect thing to hold on to. The fact that you were so close last time, combined with how much improved you feel compared to last time, that's surely got to be worth at least a couple of marks. Probably quite a bit more. So yeah, like you've done the hard work. These final few weeks, this is the kind of icing on the cake. This is the cherry on the cake. If you have a good day, if you have a bad day, I wouldn't worry about it too much at this stage. You're kind of tying a bow on everything you've done so far. And yes, it's useful time, but also at this point, yeah, the real work has been done. So don't kind of stress too much if you end up doing a 5-hour day when you intended to do a 6-hour day or whatever it is. You're in a good place now. You've got this. It's yours to reach out and take.
Yeah. I like that. Like I wrote this exam the last time and I felt maybe not prepared and got 57 and I, was 2 points short of the mark. Like just knowing that now I've worked harder than I did last time means that, I'll get more than that mark. Like, so what I have coming from this today, I just have confidence, just like that reassurance that my work will pay off. Because I think, sometimes you doubt, like, are you doing enough? Are you, So I think that to me, the one thing that it's just anchored me like, okay, you're good. You just continue doing. And now I have a plan and what I'm going to do, go through my flashcards when, that I feel anchored and reassured, as I leave. So I'm grateful for that. My perspective about my first try and now, like just talking to you now just turned it into such a positive. It's just, I don't know, it's kind of like airy-fairy, but it's just like, it's woven into, like one journey. It's like one thing. It's not like this thing you failed or whatever. Yes, you didn't make the mark, but it's like part of this prep.
Well, look, will you let me know how it goes?
Oh, for sure. I'll email you.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, William.
Well, thanks again, Sibo. And if you're wondering how the story ends, she went on to take her exams as planned. And just a few weeks after that, she dropped me an email to share the results. And it was not only a pass, but a pass with distinction. So a fantastic result. Many, many congratulations, Sibo, and well earned. If you'd like to talk to us about getting some coaching support for yourself, then my colleague, Dr. Alex Hibble, and I are both here to help. Alex specialises in supporting school-age and university-age students with the success in their major exams and academic performance generally, including written academic projects if you're at university, while I now focus mainly on adult or professional learners like Sibo. The first step, whether you're talking to myself or Alex, is usually a consultation call. So I've put links in the episode description to book a little time to chat with either myself or Alex. I'd suggest booking a chat via Dr. Alex's link if you are at school or university, or use my link to book a chat with me if you are a professional taking exams or an adult learner. Alex and I look forward to meeting and talking more about how we might be able to help you reach your exam goals the smart way. For now, thank you so much for joining us for this episode today. And particularly if you've got exams coming up in the next few weeks, I'd just love to wish you, as always, every success in the world. I'll be rooting for you. Good luck.